Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. Today we're going to be working on something that I think is pretty essential to this car. It's not anything super fancy. It's definitely not going to make the car go any faster or stop any quicker. But it is going to help me keep an eye on the lifespan and sort of the longevity of the motor. So what I'm working on right now is installing two gauges. One is the oil pressure gauge and the other is an oil temperature gauge. I went about this a few ways. So let's start from the beginning. The motor in this car is a rev up. They suffer from oil consumption. They burn through oil rather quickly, more than I think typical DEs do. So that's one thing. But VQ motors as a whole typically have oil issues, oil starvation one way or another, whether it's through leaking or burning. And I believe gallery gaskets tend to fail as well, which is something else that you can keep an eye on with your oil pressure. So there are a montage of reasons as to why you want to keep an eye on your oil temps and your oil pressure. And I finally decided that I wanted to be able to have visibility on that. Now, the problem I had getting started with this was cost. Initially, I was trying to find this obviously for the cheapest price possible, which led me towards Glowshift gauges. They're cool, they seem like they work, but reviews and feedback on them are really mixed. Some people say they only last for X amount of time and then they fail. Other people say they're just not really accurate. The gauge that I was looking at would have been a 2-in-1, so it had both a temperature and pressure display in one gauge. But I decided not to go that route after seeing all of that feedback. The next way that I was looking was actually on the higher end of the spectrum, and this was looking at AEM gauges. Problem with AEM gauges is again the cost. One of these gauges, I believe the temperature gauge was like $200, and then the oil pressure gauge was over $200 brand new. And that's obviously a lot just to be able to see pressures alone. Not to mention that on top of that, you still need to get a sandwich plate and other things to be able to plug these sensors into. So the cost was just adding up. So I kept doing research, and what I ended up finding was Prosport. So Prosport apparently is a well-known brand. Everything I could find about it said that it's a pretty good, reputable gauge to use. So I did opt for this. I did still have to get two separate gauges, but the overall cost was still cheaper than having to deal with getting the two AEM gauges. I was able to get both for under 200. No, I'm lying. Just about 200 for both gauges. But what I did end up doing, because I had already thought I was going with Glowshift, I ended up getting a Glowshift sandwich plate. So that's what we're gonna put on the oil filter, so that we can get our readings. Now, the gauges from ProShift did come complete. They came with their harnesses, they came with their power adapters and everything, and they came with their sensors. So this is the oil pressure sensor that we'll be using, and then there is a temperature sensor as well. So they came complete. I really like them, but the next thing to figure out was going to be where I'm putting them. And what I really didn't want to do was put the gauge pods on the A-pillar. I feel like it feels crowded right there. It's just right in your face. It just seemed like a lot. So I started going online looking for a couple things, trying to figure out what other ways I could mount these gauges. And I did find something in all places on Etsy. So what I found was a guy that was selling a 3D printed file so that you can 3D print a gauge pod that goes it goes over that upper cubby above the radio. So problem that came up from there is that yes, I could get the file. I don't own a 3D printer. But I have a friend who does. So this is what that pod looks like. So this is what it came out like after being printed. You can see what the actual printer was doing right here, right now. But I had him print out 2 files. So it came in, oops, almost dropped that. It came in 2 different variations. I'm that close to. It came in 2 different variations. You could get it with 2 pods or with 3. I asked him to print both for me. You could also get it where it's more driver aimed, so you can see these are at an angle. Or you could get them where they're just facing straight. I opted for the driver aimed ones because obviously I'm the only person who really needs to see them. So the reason that I went with a printout of each is because even though right now I'm only going to be running the oil temp and oil pressure sensors or gauges, down the line at some point I do want to put a wideband in. It's probably around the time that I decide to tune the car. So I'm going to need a third pod space for the air-fuel ratio. So we'll have this for the future. When that time comes, we'll just move over the 2 oil gauges and we'll fill in with the wideband in there. I already went ahead the other day because I'm such an impatient person, and I actually ran the wiring and wired in the pods. So we can go in the car right now and take a look so you can see what that looks like. All right, so don't roast me because I'm still working on it. I'm probably gonna come back and redo this, but this is kind of how it sits. So what I ended up doing with it was taking it and wrapping it in the same faux suede that I used on the dashboard. I didn't do the best job, so I'm definitely gonna pop this cover off and wrap it again. It's pretty easy to do. The pods, the gauges themselves only have 3 wires behind them, so I can literally just pop this up, unplug it, and like do whatever I need to do with that 3D printed piece. But this is essentially how it's gonna sit. I do need to make some little adjustments as well, just so that it comes down a little bit more flush, because there is a gap that it's leaving here. But I do like this. This is a cubby that I didn't use. This thing was empty. I never put anything in there. But I like this rather than having a bunch of pods lined up right here. So I'll give you guys a quick sneak peek of how they look. Again, nothing's plugged into these. They are wired up, but I haven't gotten the sandwich plate and the sensors and all of that connected on the motor side yet, and that's what we're going to be working on today. But you can take a peek at how these pods look. So they do come in a few different colors. You can switch the background, so you get the white, blue, green, and red. I'm probably going to stay somewhere between green or red. The red is closer to what, you know, the amber lights on the dash. So, I mean, it kind of matches a little bit better, even with the gauge needles on the cluster. So, I don't know, we'll figure that out. But what we're going to work on doing right now is getting the front end of the car in the air. I do have to drain the oil and remove the oil filter, and then we'll go ahead and get this oil filter sandwich plate thingamajig in place. Let me spin this around. I can show you guys. So the way that this thing works is this side with the seal or with the gasket is going to face against the motor. This nut is going to sit in the center and it'll mount where your oil filter will typically mount. So we'll go ahead and bolt this in nice and tight. And then we'll go ahead and we can get the oil filter on here. On the front of this, there's 4 different NPT ports. Sorry, I can't say that fast. So since we're only using 2, this thing did come with a couple of screws to block off the ones that we won't be using. So we'll take the block offs and close those up. I do have some thread sealant around, so I'm probably going to go ahead and throw some thread sealant around the threads of these, as well as on the pressure sensor and the temperature sensor, just to try our best to minimize leaks however we can. But we're going to go ahead and get the car in the air and get this thing rolling. All right, so we got the car up on ramps. We're going to go under, remove the service panel from the under tray and go ahead and drain the oil out into this pan. Now I'm hoping that it doesn't overflow because I think I already have 5 quarts in here and it's a 10 quart can. So hopefully it's just enough, but yeah. So we'll go ahead, we'll drain out the old oil. Ideally, if you're doing this job, you want to do it when you're changing your oil. I recently changed my oil like 2 weeks ago, and I don't really want to wait until the next oil change before I install these and wire them up. So I'm kind of looking at it on the side of it's just oil flush. I'm just draining out, you know, I let some clean oil cycle through there. Now I'm flushing it out, putting some fresh oil in again. Do what you got to do to make it make sense for you, but that's kind of how I'm just viewing it right now. So yeah, we'll go under there, drain that oil out, get the filter off, and go ahead and start working on routing the wires. Now the wires, sorry, are already actually here. I just have to take this panel back off. But the wires for the sensors, I curled them up under here, and I have my fingers crossed. I did kind of test fit it, but I didn't do the best job test fitting. Fingers crossed that the wires reach as far as they need to, which is right on down there. Need a pin for that. But yeah, we'll pull the wiring out of here, route it down towards where they need to be, let them hang and dangle, and then we'll figure out placement for the sandwich plate and get the sensors in. Hoping not to burn myself because this oil is a little warm. And we'll try not to make a mess either. Should probably get one of those Futomo, whatever that little oil valve thing is. Okay, a little spill, not too bad. So while this thing keeps drizzling and draining, I'm gonna go up top and run those wires in. Alright, so while the oil finishes draining out on the bottom, I'm gonna go ahead and get this wiring out. So if you guys don't know, right under this windshield cowl, there is a large grommet where the main harness comes through to the motor. So that's where I actually pass through like my amp wire and like any other wiring that I need to get to the rear of the car. So that's actually also where I fed the wires for the oil temp and pressure sensors. Again, the only thing I'm concerned about is if I have enough reach to get them down to the sandwich plate. So I'm gonna go ahead, throw them down there, see how I can route them, and try to get things set up. All right, so I got the harnesses down, and I kind of mapped out the sandwich plate and the orientation it needs to be in. So for everything to reach properly, I basically need it to sit this way, with the flat side down. And that way there's enough room, because the shortest of the 2 wires is the oil pressure sensor, and I needed to reach this. So this one needs to be as close back as I can so I can have enough reach for the oil pressure sensor plug to get into that. So what I'm gonna do now is get up, get the thread sealant and seal this, and then get plugs for this hole and this hole, and then we'll go ahead and start getting this thing installed and mounted. And hopefully when I'm done, no leaks. That is the biggest thing that I'm concerned about here probably, is that I get a leak either on this side of the sandwich plate with this gasket, or even maybe on the oil filter side. So we'll keep an eye on that and go ahead and get this thing in. I went ahead, I got the oil pressure switch in, or sensor in. This one's the oil temperature sensor. And then I blocked off the other 2 with these plugs. I did use some thread sealant on all 3 of these. The oil pressure one already had sealant on it, that red stuff you could see. Hopefully the sealant keeps or blocks off or seals any potential leaks that might have happened through there. Hopefully, you know, I'm avoiding one thing. But next up is to go ahead and get the sandwich plate in place and then lock it down with this bolt. What happens is this sits through the center. Make sure I have this oriented right so I don't go in there and do anything backwards. But it'll go on that way. This will go through the center and lock on where the oil filter typically would, and then the oil filter is going to latch onto this side of it, the way it would have to the motor itself. So I'm gonna go ahead, get this all lined up and in place, and then start tightening this down. I did find a socket that fits this pretty well, so we'll use a socket and ratchet to get that on there nice and snug. All right, so this is the position that we're gonna end up with this in. Because the oil pressure sensor wire is so short, this is the only way to give it like a little bit of slack so it's not super tight. So we'll leave it at this kind of canted angle. So what I'm going to do next is go ahead and tighten that nut in the center, and then we can go ahead and get an oil filter on here, plug back the oil pan, and then I need to get a zip tie or two and tie this harness up out of the way. I'll probably run it along this harness that's already existing here, and then we'll get some oil in here, and I think that's about it. So let's keep moving. Just got the oil filter on. I did just put a little bit of oil inside of the filter, so I usually do. I don't know, there's like mixed conversations about that, and now I'm just trying to dry as much oil runs as I see, because once I put oil in here, I want to be able to spot any leaks that I get, if any, God forbid, hopefully none. All right guys, so just a quick run through, quick mental note check of what we've done so far, and what we need to do. So we drained the oil, got rid of the old oil filter, we installed the Glowshift sandwich plate in between, we tightened the nut inside of that, we've got the pressure sensor, the oil temperature sensor, and the two blocks in. They're nice and tight with thread sealant on them. And then we've got our new filter in there. We poured a little bit of oil inside the oil filter, just because it seems like that's the proper thing to do to help keep the oil moving for that first startup after an oil change. At least is what they say. So, and we also got that wire zip tied to that harness that's running there. So I think we're done down here. What we're gonna do now is go up top, pour some oil in there. All right, so we got our oil in, and from what I can see right now, everything looks pretty dry. I'm not seeing any oil running out anywhere or seeping anywhere. So for now, we're good. The real test is gonna be starting the car and getting this under pressure and seeing if anything starts leaking its way out over here. Again, fingers crossed that nothing's wrong, and I got everything on there nice and tight enough. So let's go up, start the car. As we come in here and start the car up, wiggle, we should get probably, as I turn the ignition on, we'll probably get a temperature reading from the temp gauge. Hopefully, if everything's good with that pressure sensor, it should read at 0, because I mean the car's not running. And then as we start the car, we should start seeing those pressures and temperatures changing. So let's start that up. All right, so I don't know if you guys can see that. We've got an oil temp right now of 104 and an oil pressure of 50, it's climbing 60 and bouncing. But let's go check and make sure that we're not losing any oil anywhere. Everything's looking good down below. No oil leaking that I can see as of right now. And we've got oil temperature climbing slowly. It's at 122 right now, and oil pressure is at 36 and bouncing between 36, 37, 38. It's kind of moving around. But obviously we would see that change as the car is under load. Obviously it also didn't cold start. I'm sure that would affect what the pressure reading is as well. But I do need to look up and see what the running idle pressure should be for the oil, and what my temperature ranges should be, so I kind of know what to look for. All right, so car's been running for a little while now, and we've got oil temp of 140 and still climbing. And as oil temps come up, oil pressure is leveling out. You know, we started in the 30s, we're down in the 20s, which is fine for idle, especially as the oil warms up and thins out. So we're gonna keep an eye on this. I'm happy with this. I'm gonna talk to you guys in a second about how I installed this and how I routed everything, because I know I didn't talk about that at the beginning of the video. So we'll use that as kind of a closing, and I'll also add links to these gauges. No leaks from anywhere that I can find. It's obviously a great thing. That was one of my biggest concerns. Gauges seem to be reading really well. Obviously, I'll have to actually drive the car, let it get to temp, see where it's reading for not just the oil temperature, but also see how the oil pressure is behaving. As of right now, it's holding oil pressure just fine, which says to me that I might have a pretty healthy motor, which is what I suspected. So all in all, I'm happy with this. I'm just gonna let the car sit for a while, let the oil settle so I can get a proper reading and add oil if needed, and if not, we'll just put away the rest of it. Obviously, I did buy an extra quart just to keep in the car because, you know, rev up life. I should say VQ life. So this is the part that I didn't show you guys too much of. So in here, this is the little pocket cubby that obviously just comes with the regular cover. So I was able to get that cover out the other day, and this thing just fits into that groove perfectly. I cut a hole in the bottom of it. I don't know if you guys can see it there, and essentially ran the wiring all behind the glove box and through that grommet hole that I showed you guys before. So wiring was pretty easy in terms of getting the sensors in here, and it was even easier to get power because obviously I have an aftermarket head unit, so I just tapped into that for power. The harness that comes with this thing comes with 3 power wire, well, not power wires, but 3 cables that need to be connected for power. There's a small harness that comes with power, 12 volt power accessory for, you know, the trigger and a ground. And then there's a 4th wire there that's orange. It's supposed to be for illumination so that when you turn your headlights on, these things can dim and not be so bright at night. I haven't tested that to see if it works, but I'll do that in a second. But that was pretty much it. Wiring this thing was pretty straightforward. Obviously, again, the hardest part of this was getting that sandwich plate on and getting the oil filter on there and everything, which is why I would definitely 110% recommend doing this if you're already doing an oil change. If you don't need an oil change and you can put off and wait a little bit, it might be worth the wait, especially if you don't want to waste any oil like I kind of did. But that is it, folks. If you have any questions about this install process and what I did, or any questions about the products I used and kind of how those function or how I like them or how they're going longevity wise, feel free to throw a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Obviously, I'll keep posting as I do things with this car. But appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully see you guys here in the next one. Again, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. But until then, peace out, guys. God bless you. Stay safe out there.